Tonight, StormWatch spends an entire issue giving backstory for a villain that we've never met before. Earth 2 finally reaches the big battle that we've been building up to, and fast forwards through the whole thing. And if you could bring back any one Swamp Thing villain, would you? That was awful. All that and more tonight on the not-so-new 52. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 109 of the Not-So-New 52. I am your host, and it's finally just a normal week. I gotta tell you, past month, for those of you who for some reason are jumping in on episode 109, hi, I guess, but last month was devoted solely towards villain specials because Forever Evil was kicking off, and I don't know if you've ever read comics month to month. I mean, if you're listening to me on any sort of regular schedule, it's kind of like doing that, but it's really hard to remember what happened even a month ago. All of the comics that I covered this week, I have to think back 2 months ago now. And I gotta tell you, not every one of these comics is memorable enough that I was just immediately like, oh right, that's what we were doing. I'm looking at you, StormWatch. So yeah, if it seems like I'm a little bit off in terms of, and then this happened last issue, just know it's because I genuinely don't remember, and I don't care enough to look back. So, with that out of the way, let me tell you stuff that's coming out this week. This week, we have, in no particular order here, Detective Comics, Batwing, Earth 2, Green Arrow, The Movement, StormWatch, Phantom Stranger, and Swamp Thing. Additionally, there are 3 event comics going on. Least importantly, Action Comics has Psy-War Part 2. We have Green Lantern starting off the event of Lights Out, where we're dealing with Relic doing things. And last but certainly not least is Forever Evil number 2, continuing on the main story of that. So all that is going on this week. Beyond that, don't really have much more to say. Like I said, normal week, totally usual. I do have a couple things at the end of the episode I'd like to put forward, but beyond that, no reason not to jump right on into Forever Evil. Forever Evil number 2, written by Geoff Johns, art by David Finch. So last issue was kind of just the big setup stuff. We had Lex Luthor looking at the eclipse that Ultraman has caused. They, of course, launched their plan of taking over the world. And he's like, where in the hell is Superman? So this issue picks up, and we see a mouse approaching a mouse trap, and it's like just talking about how there's a mouse problem, and yet nobody has ever made a better mouse trap because this is effective, and the wire comes down and snaps the mouse's neck. And then Lex Luthor shows up, and he starts going on and off about survival of the fittest, basically saying it's not about strength, it's about adaptation, and Lex Luthor knows how to adapt, and he's making his way through the sub-basements of LexCorp until finally he comes across this security guard named Otis. And he's like, oh, Lex, sir, thank God you're here. None of the lights are working except for our phones, which all say, this world is ours. And then we cut over to the Teen Titans, who, you know, there was that whole press conference where they showed off Dick Grayson is actually Nightwing. And Red Robin is like, okay, well, if the Justice League is gone, it's up to us Teen Titans to save the day. And everyone is understandably like, okay, but we're the Teen Titans, and we are not an A-list team, so what in the hell are we supposed to do? And Red Robin basically says, we're gonna fight until our dying breath if that's what it takes, because that's what the Justice League would do. Also, I'm a little bit worried that Dick Grayson's identity was revealed, because it's kind of immediately recognizable as to who I am, Batman is, and the whole rest of the Bat family. So then we get a couple of glimpses across the world. We see stuff that's going on in Gotham, stuff is going on in Central City, stuff is going on in DC. Notably, that's where all of the little spin-off series of Arkham War, Rogues Rebellion, and Argus are happening. So just seeing that. And then we get Grid, who is the robotic half of Cyborg, now functioning on his own. And he's like, well, Crime Syndicate, I'm working with you now, and everything's going great. We're taking over the world. And Owlman points out, like, yeah, we shouldn't let them go too crazy, though, because we still need an infrastructure. Like, I'm going to rule them with an iron fist, but we need, like, a police force to make that happen. And I keep on forgetting his name. Johnny Quick? Is that his name? Yeah, Johnny Quick. He speaks up and he's like, screw that, man. Anarchy, chaos. This is what we all wanted. We rule this world already. Let's have some fun with it. And everyone kind of like chimes in like, Johnny, now hold on, slow your roll. And he's like, slow my roll? Seriously? That's not what I'm about. Me and Atomika are going to get out there and have some fun. So they run their way out. Superwoman is talking to Ultraman saying like, should we go get them? And Ultraman's like, nah, don't worry about it. We'll get them eventually. We see Powering is talking to Deathstorm. He's, of course, Green Lantern talking to Firestorm of their universe. And his ring is apparently, like, toxic to him. And we see it's causing, like, these horrific green veins to sprout up his body. And Deathstorm's like, yeah, leave it on for another week. I want to see what's going to happen. So at that point, Grid is saying, like, hey, I'm really happy that I now have a body all on my own. Thanks for that. And he basically says, I'm tracking Johnny Quick across America. He shouldn't be able to cause too much chaos, but at least we'll know where he is. And then Ultraman makes his way into the back room where Alfred, a.k.a. the Outsider, is holding on to their prisoner, who we still don't have named yet. And Ultraman's like, good, we are going to need him. We got to keep him alive, which Owlman disagrees with. So he says, all right, well, if we're keeping him alive, then we're also going to keep Dick Grayson alive. To which Ultraman's like, no, that's stupid. Like, we should kill him immediately. Superwoman chimes up, says, I agree with Owlman. To which Ultraman is like, don't you ever disrespect me in front of the League, woman. And so he goes on his way. We see that Alfred tells Owlman, hey, look, I know you want this Dick Grayson to be like the Dick Grayson of our world, which was explained in the Secret Society villains issue last month. But he's not, so get over it. And then Superwoman comes up and says, hey, Owlman, Ultraman can hear the baby inside of me. It's our baby. What are we going to do? And Owlman's like, I'll deal with it. So we go back to LexCorp. Lex is walking his way through the facility. He steps up to his Superman clone project, and he's like, subject B0. He's not ready yet. He's going to take another 5 years. So then we go to where the Watchtower crashed and where Crime Syndicate is currently set up. And a whole bunch of tanks and police forces just come up on it. They're like, we're going to take them down. Is everybody ready? And then all of a sudden, Johnny Quick just like vaporizes some of the cops by just running through them. And he's like, hey, this is fun. I'm having fun. And they start opening fire. He catches all their bullets and throws it back at them. And as he's throwing it back, that's when the Teen Titans show up. And we have the creepiest panel of Johnny Quick talking to Atomika. And he's like, look, it's your favorite, babe. Children. So at that point, Lex says, all right, it's going to take 5 years for B0 to be on board, but I'm out of time, and he's going to die soon anyway without power, so time to let him out. And he presses a button, and out comes, they call him the Creature, they call him Monster. It's Bizarro. I'm just going to call him Bizarro. So he steps out, Otis starts freaking out, and Lex is like, hey, don't worry about it. Creature, I am your creator. You will serve me and do what I say, okay? Let's test that out. Kill Otis. And Otis is like, what? No, Mr. Luthor. Bizarro doesn't move, but Otis opens fire. Bizarro doesn't care that he's being shot at, and it barely affects him. Lex doubles down, saying, no, seriously, go, kill him now. Otis turns the gun towards Lex, and at that point, Bizarro jumps in and strangles Otis and kills him. And Lex is like, all right, that's pretty good. I'm digging that. So he reaches into a cabinet, pulls out a Superman shirt that he was saving for Bizarro, and says, all right, come with me. So back to the Teen Titans. They're getting their asses kicked. Johnny Quick is throwing them all up in a whirlwind. Wonder Girl has Atomika jump into her mouth and seemingly start to strangle her. And then Johnny Quick grabs hold of Kid Flash, and he's like, whoa, kid, you got some weird vibrations on you. Are you from the future? Let's test that. And so he vibrates Kid Flash a little bit, which seemingly opens up a time portal and drags Kid Flash through it. And Atomica pops back out of Wonder Girl's mouth like, what did you do? And it's like, Kid was apparently from the future. I gave a little tug and the future tugged back. So see what'll happen there in the pages of Teen Titan, I guess. And then Johnny Quick and Atomica stand over all the wreckage they've caused. And they're like, oh my God. That was so hot. I loved that. Let's keep going. So they run off across the country to cause more chaos. We see Lex. He goes and gets his power armor. He's like, all right, well, I had a few more things I wanted to add to this. I was waiting on buying like Cord Industries to get some of their tech, but whatever. Guess I'm going to have to put it on now. We see Bizarro puts his shirt on inside out, thus reversing the logo. And he's like, all right, whatever, fine, creature. But Metropolis is in ruin. Justice League is dead. Superman is gone. This looks like a job for Lex Luthor and Bizarro. So, final thing we get is at Star Labs. We see Silas Stone and a coworker of his. They're defending some technology that they can't allow to fall into the hands of the crime syndicate. All of a sudden, the doors start bashing down, and Silas is like, all right, this is it. Man the guns. And Thomas, you've always been a good coworker. And he's like, no, I haven't. I've hated every moment of this. And he's like, all right, well, we'll talk about that later. So, door busts down, and we see on the other side of it is Batman and Catwoman holding the human half of Cyborg. And he's like, hey, Doc, I got your kid. You might need to save him. So he puts him up on the table, and then everyone's like, oh, Batman, you're alive. What about the rest of the league? And Batman says, they didn't make it. So seemingly the only survivors are Batman and Catwoman and the human half of Cyborg. So Vic. I guess he's not really Cyborg at this point anymore. It's a solid second issue. It's definitely just setting up like the crime syndicate. It's showing how much of a threat they are. Obviously, we saw that Ultraman is, but it's giving a little bit to like Johnny Quick and Atomica. And of course, it's moving Lex Luthor into place of, no, this is where the villains are going to... It's delivering on the cover that's used on the trade of all these, where it's Lex Luthor and all the other villains, like, making a stand. Here we go. So, I like it. I really enjoyed this origin story for Bizarro. I think that failed clone of Superman. It works with what was going on with Superboy. We know that was Lex Luthor stuff. It's got its own thing going on in terms of B-Zero. I think it's clever. It's just one of those little retcons that I think Geoff Johns does very well. So overall, I'd say this is probably I'll give it a straight 8. It's good. I'm not huge on David Finch's art for a lot of this, but like when he needs to make Johnny Quick look creepy, he's creepy. He's very creepy. But then there's other panels of like Lex Luthor that I just don't think work as well. But it's hit or miss. It still deserves an 8. Green Lantern number 24, written by Robert Venditti, art by Billy Tan. This is part 1 of the Lights Out event, but that's kind of disingenuous because it's been going on for quite some time in Green Lantern New Guardians, but regardless, we're dealing with it here. So we open up on Oa. We see that Hal is there with John, Kilowog, and Selak, and there's a problem with the central power battery that Selak is trying to fix. And Hal's telling him like, oh, well, go on, fix it. Like, what's going on? He's like, look, we've got power. It's coming out, but it's severely diminished. Something is wrong, and we're running on like emergency fuel now. So John explains that at the end of whatever issue it was in, probably Green Lantern Corps, the spirit of the battery, the what was it called? Entity named Ion, just kind of splatted out, and he looked sick. And then a lot of other entities showed up, and they were like, hey, we're going to go die. Come with us. And Hal's like, okay, that sounds bad, but like, would that even affect our rings? And they're like, well, I mean, we should talk to Kyle. Kyle was actually in charge of Ion for a while. Like, he hosted him in his body. So anybody know where Kyle is? And then all of a sudden, Kyle, St. Walker, Carol, and the rest of the Guardians all teleport in. And they crash down, and Carol's like, hey, Hal, Relic is a thing. And he's like, who the hell's Relic? He sounds old and stupid. And Kyle explains, like, no. He is old. He's from, like, the universe before ours. He figured out that emotional energy is a finite resource, and that when it was drained from his universe, all of it went bye-bye here. And Hal's like, okay, well, I don't believe that. I don't think that we are draining the universe, so that's stupid. And at that point, we just wait for a little bit. We see that Saint Walker is not better. He's not healed or anything like that. Kyle can't figure out what's up with it. The Blue Lanterns, of course, are gone in that book as well. And Hal kind of pauses for a second. He's like, oh, they're going after other cores? Oh, Guy's in trouble. And he's like, what do you mean Guy's in trouble? He's like, oh, nothing, you didn't hear that. So at that point, he's like, okay, so this guy's old. But, like, if he's that old, how did he manage to beat the crap out of you? And the Guardians are like, he's really big. And then all of a sudden, Relic's ship shows up. And, of course, it's really big. And he steps out and he's like, hey, hi, Green, lightsmiths. I'm here for your light. And Hal's like, hey, we're not lightsmiths, we're lanterns. And, no. And Relic's like, okay, here's the thing. Whatever you want to call yourself, I've already figured you guys out. I've looked into that one's brain. I know what all this stuff is. I'm going to take your light now, and if you surrender, I will let you live. That's the trade-off here. And at that point, he says, of course, we're never going to surrender. We're Green Lanterns, damn it. And so Relic's like, all right, pity. Clicks a button, and all these little drone robots come out and start latching themselves onto all the lanterns. And Hal's asking Kyle what the hell this is. Kyle's like, I don't know. He didn't use this last time. I guess he's got a bunch of toys. And all the drones start making their way to the central power battery. So Hal's like, all right, well, I know how to throw a punch. So he blasts Relic with his ring, and Relic's like, ow, that kind of stung. Don't do that again. And so Hal fires off another shot, and Relic uses his stuff to deflect it and send it back at Hal, which Kyle's like, oh yeah, by the way, he can do that. And Kyle's like, oh, thank you. So at that point, he's just going in after that. And John and them, like, they're held down by the bug stuff, but the bugs eventually just go all focus on the central power battery. And John just asks, why isn't he attacking us? Like, what's going on? It's like, look, he's not interested in fighting us. He genuinely thinks he's doing a good thing, and he's just after the power battery. That's it. So then Hal finally steps up, and he says, all right, game plan. Kyle and Carol, you guys take out the drones. Kilowog, go get the recruits, make sure they're cool. John and Selak, go get all the tiny little portable power batteries we have, as many as you can of those. I'm gonna go punch Relic in the face. And John's like, wow, Hal, you're acting like a real leader. So everyone goes off to do their things, and they just start failing miserably right off the bat. So we have John and Selak make their way towards the other power batteries. The drones are already in there draining them, so they're just doing whatever they can. Hal tries throwing some, like, missiles and stuff at Relic. None of it works because he's just using his tech to catch it all. The recruits are getting just blasted as Kilowog's trying to defend them and teach them how to blast away the drones at the same time. And Kyle and Carol are stuck within... Well, I guess Hal manages to upset Relic enough that he's like, all right, you want to keep firing off missiles? I'm going to do my thing. And he activates the cannons or whatnot on all the drones. So immediately there's a million laser beams firing off in every direction. John and Selak return with like 4 power batteries and say, this is all we could get. And they're already drained. They're already emptied. So we don't have any hope here. Kyle and Carol are just trying to defend themselves from the lasers at this point, and it doesn't look like it's going well. And so Hal's like, okay, Selak, what does protocol say in a situation like this? And he's like, the central power battery, we got to defend it. And Hal's like, okay, everybody converge. Oh, it's already out. And they look up and they see, yep, nope, it's been completely drained. Relic's like, see? Man, I was done with that in like 10 seconds. You guys were almost on empty. And they're like, shut up. It's only empty because you drained it, not because of us. So he fires all of his lasers at the central power battery. It blows up in a massive explosion. And then Relic takes off. And Selak's like, oh my god, he blew up the central power battery. You bastard. And everyone's like, well, it's fine. We'll deal with it. We just got to go take care of Relic before he gets to the other core. And Selak turns to Hal. He's like, no, you don't understand, man. When we put the central power battery on this planet, we did some, like, weird stuff with the planet's core so that they were symbiotic. With the power battery gone, Oa is going to die. And that's where we leave off. So I like it. I think it's fine. I think it does a great job of I mean, last time we saw Relic was him destroying the Blue Lantern Corps, and he did a fantastic job of making him feel like a menacing villain that is highly competent at doing this stuff. I think that here is a bit weaker in that regard. I think that it's much more effective with the Blue Lantern Corps because of just how quickly he just did it. Because the Green Lanterns were just basically like 3 Green Lanterns and 3 recruits and then Kyle and Carol, it didn't feel like they were really able to put up that much of a fight. You know, it feels like it was just wiping the floor with them because they were so ill prepared. But I do like the idea of, okay, because of this action, O is going to die. It's a ripple effect towards something that I think is more interesting because of the actions rather than the actions themselves. So overall, I think art-wise it looks great. If I had any real critique here, it is that while Hal does throw out these plans, I feel like we only ever focus on like, a tenth of it. Like they should have devoted an entire issue towards the plan part, like, oh, we can do this, we can finally survive. But I guess it does go against the fact that Relic is just this highly efficient guy, and we need to have this entire story done in like 5 issues, I think. So yeah. Overall, I'm going to give this one I'll give it a 7.5. I do enjoy it. I think it's good. Next part of this is going to be in Green Lantern Corps, so we'll see. I mean, I don't even know who we'd be dealing with there because John's already here. So, yeah, I think it probably would just be the same group again. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing it, seeing how we handle all this. Maybe we go out and deal with the entity problem. Who knows? But 7.5 for this. Action Comics number 24, written by Mike Johnson, art by Tyler Kirkham. This is part 2 of Psy-War. Last part was in Superman. And if I remember correctly, it was basically Superman was caught in the middle of a fight between the Hive Queen and Hector Hammond. And then they both got shut up by Psycho Pirate, who just showed up at the end and said, "I'm Psycho Pirate, Clark Kent." So we open up in the hospital, and there was also a thing where Lois like shot up awake and said Superman. We open up in the hospital, and Lois's boyfriend is there talking to the doctor saying, "I'm telling you, she just shot up, Doc. She's awake. She's able to do things." And the doctor's like, "Okay, you've been here for like days and you haven't slept at all. Is it possible this is just your mind playing tricks on you?" And he's like, "Don't you tell me that, Doc. She's about to wake up." And he runs his way back in there, screaming her name. And when she gets in there, Lois is gone, and the window is open. So then we go down into the headquarters of Hive, where we left Superman and Psycho Pirate. And Psycho Pirate's like, "Clark Kent, that's a stupid name. I thought it would be like more super." And Clark's like, "Crap, he can read my mind. Oh, this isn't good." And so he's like, "All right, who are you? What did you do to Hector Hammond and the Hive Queen?" And he's like, hey, don't be upset. I'm on your side. I'm on the side of good. There's Hector Hammond. He's just unconscious, and Hive Queen is kind of exploded everywhere. Okay, that one was my bee. Sorry about that. But if you want to know who I am, I need to show you something first. Follow me. And Superman's like, "I'm not going to follow you." And then he starts flying up. He's like, "Are you doing something to me?" And he's like, "Yeah, my abilities allow me to influence your emotions." And Jesus Christ, man, I could feel the suspicion coming off of you. I get it. I understand. You are upset, especially because I can read your mind and see your secret identity. But you got to understand, I'm here to save the world just like you. So welcome to the heart of Hive. And he makes his way in to what Psycho Pirate calls the Swarm. And he says, "Yeah, this is what Hive Queen was doing. It's a prison for psychic people, for psionics. And I was held here for a while. Right there's where my cell was. I managed to escape. But if you notice, all of these people are hooked up Matrix style. And that's because she was using these cells to fuel her own psychic powers. That was her thing. However, if you notice that one, and that one, they are part of the 20. And Superman's like, "Oh, the 20, of course. It all makes sense now." And Psycho Pirate explains, "Yeah, no, we all knew somewhere deep down that Brainiac is coming back. That's just a thing that we knew." And he's like, "What do you mean we?" He's like, "Oh yeah, I'm part of the 22. Don't worry about that." we all knew Brainiac was coming back. Hive Queen bought into it of it being a good thing. I think it's a bad thing because Brainiac is going to use humans as the hosts for all of his race that he killed off in a side issue. So he downloaded their consciousness. Now he's going to put it in the human race. So that's why I don't think it's good that Brainiac's returning, and I need your help to stop him, Superman. And at that point, Superman's like, okay, and I feel I could trust you now. And Psycho Pirate says, cool. Now I launch my attack. And he starts using his psychic snakes to go after Superman. And he's like, yeah, no, here's the thing. You've got tons of psychic energy coming off you, Clark. You don't even realize it. I need that to fuel me. I will be stronger with it than you could possibly be. So gimme. And Superman, of course, says no, blasts him with heat vision. He's like, oh, okay, didn't see that one coming. Regardless, I'm going to continue my attack. So he attacks Superman and dives into his psyche. And then all of a sudden, Superman wakes up and he is back in his t-shirt and jeans phase. And he's over top the city. And he's like, whoa, I can fly. That's crazy. What was I doing? I had the craziest nightmare. It was like a snake man as I was sleeping. And then all of a sudden, he hears an explosion behind him. And as he looks behind him, he's exploded. He's being hit by artillery. And he's like, who's attacking me? I'm going to go get them. Also, I guess I'm bulletproof. Didn't know that before. So he sees the military is the one attacking him, and he's like, wait, guys, I'm on your side. I'm fighting for the good of America and whatnot. And Psycho Pirate shows up on some nearby screens, and he's like, oh, but they're scared of you, Clark. They're terrified. You'll never be one of them. And he's like, wait a minute. I know you. And he's like, yeah, of course you... okay, yes, I am diving into your psyche. I'm searching through your barriers in order to get to the heart of your brain. I got to do that in the form of memories. So this is a memory that I'm tweaking and messing with and making it worse. But they're terrified of you because you don't belong here. You're not one of them. So go ahead, stop them, Clark, destroy them. And he's like, no, I'll never do that. I'm here to help these people. I just need to talk to them. And he's like, oh, yeah, see how well that works. So Psycho Pirate then launches another snake attack on him. Clark wakes up. He's a teenager about to make out with Lana Lang on top of his barn. He freaks out, and Lana's like, what the hell, man? You told me to kiss you, and now you're freaking out. What's going on? And he's just like, oh, I'm sorry, Lana. I'm getting deja vu or something. And all of a sudden, a rock hits him in the back of the head. He falls off the top of the barn. And we see it's a bully named Kenny Braverman, who's like, you really thought you'd get with Lana Lang? And Clark looks like he's about to heat vision the guy. When all of a sudden Ma and Pa can't come out. Bullies scatter, and Ma's like, oh, you could have been killed falling off from that roof, Clark. And Pa comes up, he's like, how many times have I told you, Clark? And Clark says, oh, I know, Pa, don't go up on the roof. And he's like, no, how many times have I told you you're a disappointment, and I never should have found you in that cornfield? And Ma's like, yeah, we hate you. You're a gross alien. Get out of here. So he runs away. And Psycho Pirate's like, yeah, no, you feel like such an outcast, and the emotions coming off that. Top tier. So Clark runs out into the cornfield. He finds the rocket ship, and he's like, oh yeah, see? Just hop in this rocket ship, Clark, and escape. Isn't that what you want? To feel like you belong? Isn't that it? And Clark's like, yes, that is what I will do. So then all of a sudden we go back one more memory. He's a baby. It's Krypton, the death of Krypton, and Psycho Pirate's like, oh, I don't even have to mess with this one. This one's just emotional on its own right, so that's neat. So he's like, oh, little baby Clark, you're here at the end of your planet, at the end of life as you knew it. Let me bring you peace. Let me deliver you away from this bad place. And he gets through baby Clark's emotions, and seemingly Psycho Pirate has taken over Superman's mind and completely wiped it. And he's like, all right, well, Clark or Cal or whatever your name is, thanks for the emotions. I'm feeling super duper now. I'm going to go make sure that Metropolis and the world is safe from Brainiac. And then all of a sudden he gets hit by an energy attack, and we see Electric Blue Lois shows up saying, hi, I'm Lois. If you've done something to Superman, you're going to have to go through me first. So that'll be over in Superman, wherever that wraps up. I don't know what a Psywar is anymore. I wish I did. I thought going into this it was going to be this whole thing of, oh no, there are so many psychic characters, and that's one thing Superman can't punch. But now it seems like we're down to just Psycho Pirate, which is fine. I'm not opposed to that being the story, but now it's about Brainiac's return and we're delivering on all this 20 stuff, and I don't know what the point of this is anymore. I'm just a bit lost. So overall, I'll give this one a 6. I hate it in concept. Hate's a strong word. I dislike it in concept because it just seems unfocused and like we have no idea where we really want to go with this. But I have to say that I do like the idea of these memories being, emotional gateways and then being messed with a little bit, and that's what gets to Superman. I think that was well done. I think it was a good idea inside of a bad idea of an event. So, yeah, I'll give this one a 6. I can't say much more about it. So, Psy-War Part 3, wherever the hell that's going to happen. Detective Comics number 24, written by John Layman, art by Jason Fabok. So last issue, we had Batman discovering and truly confirming that Caldwell is Wrath. He launched his attack and started electrocuting cops all over the city, and Alfred may or may not be attacked/dead. Who knows? So we open up with a quick flashback of Caldwell delivering the city with all this high-tech stuff for the police force, and Batman's like, yeah, they thought it was super awesome and cool at the time, but they're not thinking that now, and we see them all being electrocuted. And Gordon's looking on at his cops, seeing them all get shocked, and he's like, oh god, my men, what am I supposed to do? So Batman's flying over the city in his bat jet, and he's talking to Wrath, because Wrath and him has like a communicator thing, and basically Batman is saying, like, I'm going to stop this, Caldwell, and I'm going to stop you. And Caldwell's like, don't call me Caldwell. Dude, I have worked so hard on the Wrath name. Call me Wrath. Come on, seriously. I've always been Wrath underneath. Caldwell was just a mask. This is who I really am. So he throws Alfred down, just knocking him out, seemingly. And then he hops into his own ship, and he's like, you want to go Batjet? All right, let's go Batjet. So at that point, we see Wrath has a super high-powered, like, just beast of a tank airship, and Batman's like, okay, let's run through what we got right now. 90% of the police force is currently incapacitated. 4.5 minutes, they'll be dead, and I'm being chased through the skies by a tank. I've had worse. So he reasons out that Caldwell gave up some maneuverability in order to get all the machines on that ship, so he's able to weave in and out of the buildings of Gotham, and then he manages to activate a self-destruct sequence that gets Wrath stuck in the explosion, while Batman bails out in a much smaller, like, paraglider, basically. And he's like, okay, Wrath's big tank ship is taken care of. I gotta go back to Caldwell because that's where the trigger is, and I can disable all of the vests that are shocking the police. So we see Gordon's being held back by Harvey Bullock, saying like, oh, you can't touch him, Jim, or else you'll be shocked too. So Batman makes his way back to Caldwell's place, shuts off all the vests. Gordon immediately tells over the radio, like, everyone who can hear this, take off the Caldwell tech. It's clearly a bad thing. So Alfred comes to and he's like, all right, we cool? And Batman's like, yeah, shut it off. He's not going to cause a problem there anymore. However, I do think this is not over for him yet. And Alfred says, I don't think so either. Take a look at this. And he looks at a secret hidden file that is on Caldwell's things of a police case from back in like the 70s or the 80s. Actually, you know what? I guess it would have been late 90s. It says 15-year-old crime photo, but it turns out that the father of Caldwell was a thief who stole a bunch of diamonds, and he was gunned down by police, and the diamonds were not recovered. So Alfred and Batman pieced together, okay, he hates the police because the police killed his father, and also they, like, profited off of it. They stole the diamonds because back then the police in Gotham were much more corrupt. And he's like, all right, so what do we do now? And Batman says, well, I'm going to take Caldwell, I'm going to erase it off the map of Gotham, and then I'm going to go after Wrath himself. So couple hours pass, and then all of a sudden a actual tank just rolls through the streets of Gotham. Wrath is inside. It makes its way up to the 13th precinct, which is apparently the most busy precinct in Gotham. He waits specifically for the transition between shifts where there's going to be the most cops, and then he just starts opening fire on the precinct. And he's like, well, mission accomplished, and he goes out to see all the dead cops, but then eventually Batman shows up in a suit of armor, and he's like, I told them all to evacuate. They're not here. It's just you and me. And Wrath is like, how did you know I was going to be here? And he's like, oh, I found your secret file. This is the police precinct that killed your father. And, all that stuff. And, he basically just toys with Wrath a little bit. And he's like, oh, they murdered him. They killed my father for no reason. So at that point, Batman says, yeah, and you've been trying to murder too. Now it's time for justice. So he starts laying a smackdown on Wrath. Wrath lays smackdown on him until finally they bust outside of the police precinct. And we see that they are surrounded by a bunch of cops who are all the ones going here. And Batman has managed to put a vulnerability into his armor, and he's like, yeah, I can totally kill Wrath right now, or not kill, but take him out, but the police need a win today, so I'm going to let that be a thing. So at that point, Gordon steps up and he's like, Mr. Caldwell, you are under arrest for a lot of stuff. And he's like, Batman couldn't even take me out. What makes you think you can? And he's like, oh, because we've got your equipment. Open fire, and then they blast Caldwell with, I think, his own tank. And Caldwell's like, all right, that hurt a lot, but I'm still standing. And then Batman steps up and he just basically punches him in the face and says, nah, the police took you down today. But I finished you off. I want you to really know that. I'm the one who punched you in the face. So he gets arrested. Batman steps up to Gordon and he's like, I can make sure Bruce Wayne pays for building your police precinct again. He's just like, don't bother. We're going to seize all of Caldwell's assets, which is going to be a couple $1 billion. So that's neat. And then Batman goes and starts to walk away. And we see this one cop step up named Wallace. I don't know if he's been around. And he says, Batman, wait up. Here's the thing. You know at the end of Batman Begins when Gordon says, what about escalation? I truly believe that. I thought that you were only making more crazies in this city, but this crazy was because of the cops. He's our fault. So you saved us from a thing that we did. I guess you can't be all bad. Also, yeah, I had to watch a couple of my buddies get electrocuted, so that wasn't fun. But thank you, Batman. You're making it better for us out there. So then he ends with the line, if there's going to be some bats in Gotham, maybe that isn't a bad thing. And then we get one page of this kid running down the street, and he's attacked by a swarm of bats and just carried off. So, whatever that's going to be. Finally, we get one last thing where Caldwell is in Blackgate. Gordon's meeting with him, and he says, hey, I've reopened your case. Your father was guilty of stealing diamonds, but I'm officially pointing that the cops were not right in what they did. They committed murder. They went above and beyond of their police abilities, and they killed your father without reason. And Caldwell's like, okay, why would you do that? That doesn't make you look any better. It just looks like you can't control your cops. And he's like, it's not about what's right or about what looks good. It's about what's right. It's about justice. And so he walks out. Caldwell goes back to his cell, and he's just like, psh, doesn't even matter. When I get out of here, I'm still going to kill him. I'm just that evil. And then from across the hall, he's like, oh, you hate the guy? Do you also hate Batman? And Caldwell's like, yes, I do. And then we see across the cell is Emperor Penguin, who says, my, then we have quite a bit to discuss. So Emperor Penguin's doing that. I think this all comes together in Forever Evil Arkham War. Maybe. I don't know. But we'll see. I can't decide if I like or hate his backstory. That is, this whole thing is because his father was gunned down by corrupt cops. Because on one hand, it makes sense, but on the other hand, it's just so basic that I kind of wanted something more to it, you know? I wanted something specific to maybe Gordon or even the cops nowadays, because they point out Gordon has been cleaning up the police system in Gotham over those past 15 years. This was happened under the previous commissioner's eye. So I don't know. I'm of two minds about it. I gotta say, though, I don't think that this really wrapped it up as neat and tidy as they would like, because they did a whole thing where it's like, no, the cops needed this win. But, like, Batman's still the one who took care of all of it. Like, from the beginning to end. I don't feel like they really gave that one to the police. So, overall, I think this is probably only like a 6.5. What's really saving it, though, is the art. Jason Fabok looks fantastic the whole way through, as he always does. So, yeah, 6.5 for this. I'm not surprised that Wrath has not really shown up in any major capacity since, because he's just not that compelling of a villain. Batwing number 24, written by Justin Gray and Jimmy Palmiotti, art by Eduardo Pansica. So, last issue, a lot happened. Wayne Tower blew up by a female British assassin that kicked Batwing's butt, and then also his girlfriend kind of dumped him, and his family wants nothing to do with him because their house got invaded. Anyway, we open up on the whole butt-kicking thing. And Batwing is currently falling off of a building. His suit is non-functioning. And he's like, all right, well, this is bad. I need to reboot the suit, but it's not rebooting. My dad's an idiot for designing it that way, but I got to keep trying. So as he's about to hit the ground, he manages to kick it on at the last second, just enough to get his wings deployed. And he does the whole, that scene out of Avengers where Iron Man swoops up at the last second. And so he manages to get his way on top of a building, just barely gets over top, and then tumbles his way farther until he tumbles so hard the other side that he crashes into a window where a bunch of women are having, as far as I can tell, like a bachelorette party. And everyone scatters, and he's like, oh, sorry, ladies, I swear I'm not going to hurt anyone. I just crashed in. And this one woman, like, freaks out, pushes him out the window again, and he falls into a dumpster. So we see the assassin lady is like, hey, guy who hired me. Good news, tower blew up. Bad news, I didn't get to kill Batwing. He survived, and there's too many witnesses for me to jump in. And he's like, that sucks. I really hate that Batwing. So she offers, like, yeah, I can stay in town a few days and go back after him. And he gives the option of, like, look, if you don't get him, you keep the expenses. If you do get him, then, like, I'll pay you a week regardless, and it'll just come out of the bounty. And she's like, all right, sounds good. So Batwing crawls out of the dumpster, takes off his costume, or at least his mask, and he's like, all right, well, good news, I'm alive. Bad news, all of my clothes are now across town. And he looks through the dumpster and he finds like a cart that's used by a homeless man. And he's like, well, I'm going to have to borrow some clothes. So he starts putting on these horrific smelling ratty old clothes. The homeless guy comes out and be like, hey, you're stealing from me. And he's like, I kept my wallet with my suit. So here you go. Here's some money. Go pop some tags or whatever. So homeless guy lets him take some clothes and then he hails a cab. When he gets back home, he smells like trash, and the cab driver tells him so, but Xena is sitting outside of his house, and she's like, I was calling you all night, Luke. Where were you? And he's like, oh, wait, hold on, you just broke up with me. Why are you here crying on my doorstep? And it turns out, when she got home last night, Xena's father suffered a heart attack, and he is dead. And Luke's like, oh, geez, yeah, no, I get it. Come on inside. Like, you can stay here for a while. So he brings her up and he says, you can crash wherever, or you can crash in the bedroom, I'll take the couch, but I really need to take a shower. And she leans in and kisses him, and he's like, whoa, hold on, okay, you've been through a traumatic event, you may not be thinking clearly. And he's like, no, you're right, I just need you right now. Okay, can we just do that? And at that point, they make their way to the shower together. So some time passes. Luke manages to come to Xena's bail, just leaving a thank you note. And then Luke checks his messages. And it's basically all just from his family calling and saying, like, hey, yeah, like, come on by, show up. Like, your father's not going to be that angry with you. But then, like, his sister or whatever calls and just be like, oh, you suck. You're the worst. So it's a bit torn there. So he left his cell phone with his clothes, so he has to call up Batman via his helmet puts it on and tells him like, hey, Batman, there's a crazy British assassin lady, blonde. Do you know anything about her? And he's like, oh yeah, her name is Lady Vic. Did you manage to survive a fight with her? And he's like, yeah. He's like, wow, okay, I'm actually impressed. You should be dead right now. And he's like, yeah, thanks. I need a place to repair my suit because it is all sorts of busted up. And Batman says, okay, there's a bunker. It's nearby. I'll send you it over the official Bat app, which raises so many questions, but regardless, he sends Luke over to a bunker, and inside is just a whole bunch of high-tech stuff for building suits, and he's like, it's Christmas. So he spends some time fixing up the suit, getting it built as he would want to build it, and then eventually makes his way to the Fox mansion. And he arrives with some coffee. We see that the builders are there fixing up the place. He goes in and talks to his mom, and the mom's like, oh, you couldn't even call? You couldn't return any of our calls? And he's like, I had a busy night. Xena's dad died. And she's like, oh, okay, I totally get it. Your dad will understand too. Go on, go talk to him. Make sure you treat that girl right. She's one of the good ones. So at that point, I guess he fixes things up with the family or something. I don't know. But we cut to him using some GPS data to track the tracker that he put onto Lady Vic. And he manages to track her to a penthouse and crashes in through the skylight. And then Lady Vic's like, took you long enough. And he's like, what do you mean? Took me? You're literally wearing a bikini right now. How are you the one that's been waiting for me? And she's like, I knew you put a tracker on me. I was just going to wait around. It saves me the trouble of having to track you down. And he's like, all right, fair enough. And so he basically says, yeah, I'm not going to outskill her, so I just have to outthink her. So he throws this ball at her, which scatters into a bunch of tiny little bat stickers, I guess, like drones or something. Hard to say, but they attach themselves to Lady Vic. Turns out it's laced with a fear toxin mixed with a truth serum. So he starts beating her up as she's a little bit disoriented. And she's like, oh, what do you do for a living? And she's like, I'm a professional assassin, you idiot. He's like, all right, well, who hired you to blow up Wayne Tower? It turns out it's a guy named Charlie Caligula. And he wanted me to destroy all of the Wayne buildings and any bats that he comes across. And Batwing has a camera. He's recording all this. And he's like, who is this guy? What does he want? And he's like, oh, he's, an Italian gangster. Thinks he's Caesar reincarnated. He's untouchable and he pays well. And she also implicates him as being behind the Marabunta as well. So at that point, Batwing gets some handcuffs on her. Police come in. He bashes out a window. And it's like, hey, Batman, you know anything about Charlie Caligula? And it's like, yeah, no, actually I do. It was only a matter of time until he showed up again. He's a delusional criminal. He was behind the company that was in the diamond mine in the Congo. He's behind the Marabunta. Yeah, no, if you want him, he's in Rome. Get your ass over there. And Batwing's like, yeah, okay, I'll be there soon, but I've got something I need to take care of first. And Batman's like, seriously, what could be more important? Couldn't it wait? And he's like, no, I can't wait. And we see that it is the wake for Xena's father. He shows up, gives Xena a big hug and says, yes, you're not alone. I'm here for you. I'm so sorry for your loss. And that's how the issue ends. Except for a little tease for Batwing 0 Year, which I don't know if that's going to be an arc or if that's just going to be like a single issue thing, because once we hit issue 25, everybody has like a Batman 0 Year tie-in. So maybe it's that. I don't know. Regardless, it's good. It's fine. I like the way it's kind of threading all this different stuff together and playing it realistically. Like, we have Xena coming back, and yeah, it's a bit weird that her father died that night, but like, I like how it was just her father died. It wasn't like, oh, my father was caught up in this explosion with this supervillain that only found me because you're Batwing. It's like, no, just a heart attack. It happens. It's awful, but it just happens, and I like that. Same sort of thing with when he gets back to the parents' place. Sure, he didn't say that he was Batwing, but he straight up said, like, no, Xena's dad died, and that's why I was late. Like, that's believable. That's fine. It's working, and it's something that nobody could hold against him. I just like how it's not basically a soap opera. It's more of a realistic look at this stuff. And then we throw in this weird Charlie Caligula thing, and I don't know where to go with that, but we'll see how the character evolves. So overall, I'd say this is like a solid 7. It's not a standout book. It's not like the greatest thing, but it's definitely an interesting look at basically a different version of Batman. Of some, like, there's nothing that's setting him in the Bat mythos. He's his own original character, so he's able to do whatever it is he feels like, and I like that clean slate aspect. So, 7. Earth 2, number 16, written by James Robinson, art by Nicola Scott. Last issue, our heroes got a smackdown from Steppenwolf's goons as the World Army moved to invade Steppenwolf's country, whatever it was, Darain, I think. So this issue picks up with Steppenwolf just posing for the camera, saying, all right, let's get started, as we then get a 2-page spread of the entire World Army starting their attack on Steppenwolf. Just jetpacks and lasers everywhere. And it says, the World Army's invasion of Darain began at 10:17 a.m., and within an hour, we had hopelessly lost. And we see Steppenwolf is just slaughtering everybody seemingly single-handedly and just completely destroying them. And Steppenwolf gets some narration in there too. He's saying like, yeah, I remember the first guy I killed, but the thousands after that are all just kind of a blur. So I worked for Darkseid, but now this world is lost to me and me alone. Just my power. So we see Steppenwolf is fighting them off. He's not actually alone. He has 3 goons, that the same ones that attacked our main heroes. Beguiler with chaos energy, Bedlam controlling minds, and Brutal, who's just really, really strong. And he just is bashing through ships and stuff like that, and eventually reaches the ship of the Commander-in-Chief, Jason Foster, and blows it up. And we see, what's his name? He's only calling him Amar, but he has a last name. The commander guy we've been following. Him and Mr. Terrific see the ship blow up, and it's like, okay, he's about to come for us. We gotta bail. So everyone bails off the ship. Mr. Terrific clings on to the commander, and he's just like, okay, hey, I've got a jetpack, but I need both hands to do this, so I'm just going to let you fall for a little bit. And so he does, and then Mr. Terrific swings up and grabs him, and he's just like, okay, so we're alive. Is anyone else? As they look around at all the wreckage. And we see somewhere else is all of our heroes coming to, and they're like, okay, we're alive, but why? We were literally sitting ducks. They could have killed us while we were unconscious. What's up? And everyone's like, well, who knows? But regardless, let's go make sure that this was their biggest mistake they'll ever make. We're gonna go there and we're gonna take care of them. And everyone's now just working together. Everyone's on the same side. And Sandman calls in. He's like, let me check to see how the invasion's going. The invasion failed. Everyone's dead. And this is like, okay, well, what are the orders now, Sandman? And he says, well, everyone's evacuating, but we can go and help with that still. Yeah. Cool. So everyone, Dr. Fate gets a portal and everyone steps through it, comes out on the other side where Steppenwolf has just finished slaughtering the army. And as the new heroes come out, we have a young woman and a cameraman from a news place. She's the one doing all the narrating, basically saying like, and this is what I saw, all this stuff. Basically, the way I'm recounting it to you. And we so all the Wonders show up, and they are picking up all of the army that they can find that are still alive, picking them all up, throwing them through Dr. Fate's portals and getting them out of there. All except for one, which is Green Lantern. He's specifically looking for Steppenwolf, and he swoops up to him, throws a solid punch, and just starts trying to beat the crap out of him. And he does a pretty good job right up until Brutal comes up behind and starts, ganging up on Green Lantern. We have Adam just being like, hey, I've got your back, man, but then Brutal just once again throws him down to the ground. No problems whatsoever. And then Steppenwolf and Brutal double team Green Lantern into the dirt. And the woman's like, and then when I saw the Green Lantern stop moving, Steppenwolf turned his head and looked at me. And he starts moving towards this woman in her camera. And Steppenwolf's like, I'm always one for the press. Hey, Earth, I just destroyed your heroes. I just decimated the World Army. You literally have nothing that can stop me. And this isn't Darkseid's invasion anymore. This is all me. This is Steppenwolf ruling your Earth now. So resist me and die. And furthermore, and then Brutal cuts Steppenwolf in half. Brutal, being his subordinate, uses laser eyes and just chops Steppenwolf straight down the middle on live TV. And then he's floating above him and he says, that idiot, that fool. He calls himself a god, saying that I'm his lesser? No, it's time for him to learn that the conquest of Earth is all for Darkseid. And Brutal takes off his mask and reveals it's Superman, saying, Hail Darkseid. And he's got a dark-ass outfit with the Kryptonian S. And the lady's like, okay, evil Superman. Got it. So at that point, Sandman comes in, manages to get them like teleported away with his Sandman powers, as there's this giant fissure on the planet Earth, like halfway across it. It looks like someone just stuck a knife in it, like long ways. And yeah, it ain't good. So that's the issue. I mean, I'll give them, I'm not a huge fan of when comics end on like super obvious cliffhangers where it's like, yeah, like when the cliffhanger is this the end for our heroes? Clearly the answer is no. Clearly the answer is they're going to be back. They're going to be fine. But this is one of those cliffhangers where it's like, yeah, what in the hell is actually going on? And it makes you want to come back and try to discover that. So I'm in on that. That's solid. As for the rest of the issue, I mean, it's the big confrontation issue with Steppenwolf and the army. And I get that if they didn't want to really focus on that, if it was more so this idea of both Steppenwolf and the army are now out and it's now this evil Superman, I get why they didn't give it that much time, but it does feel like we've been building up to it for so long that having it be literally a one-page turn of, we started the attack, we lost the attack, it just kind of felt a little bit too light. I think it should have been at least a few. There were a few pages in here that were dedicated specifically to, and the Wonders went around and started helping everybody because they're so good and nice. It's like, yeah, but we know that. Let's take those pages and dedicate it towards showing a cool fight scene between Steppenwolf and the army. Minimum. But it's all in all a tiniest little nitpick. I'm not that upset about it. Overall, I'd probably give this one... It's probably like a 7, but I'm going to bump it up to the 7.5 just because that last twist came out of nowhere. Not even the evil Superman, but just that, no, after all that, Steppenwolf just gets eviscerated. He's just dead. I'm down for that. That's a top tier twist for me. So yeah, I'm giving this a 7.5, and I am definitely looking forward to seeing how in the world we're going to come out after that one. Green Arrow number 24, written by Geoff Lemire, art by Andrea Sorrentino. So last issue, it was a whole thing. I mean, the first page here really does explain everything. We had them going, and they got Shadow free from Vertigo's control. And Shadow revealed that she was a lover of Oliver's father, and they had a daughter, making it his half-sister, and the half-sister is Emiko, who is currently acting as muscle, more or less, for Komodo. And then Vertigo also managed to possibly shatter Oliver's eardrum because of his attack on Oliver. So at this point, Oliver is just in a bunker trying to retrain his body because his balance is all off with the shattered eardrum. And he's not doing great. All of his arrows are missing. And Henry is on the computer saying, hey, you need to see a doctor, man. I'm not a doctor. I did a scan. Your inner ear is all sorts of messed up. This could be permanent. You need to get some medical help. And everyone's telling him, yeah, do that. And he's just like, no, don't worry about it. I'm sure everything will be fine. We need to figure out what's going on. We need to track down... this whole thing. And they go through the whole thing that Oliver and him are going to Prague. They're going to figure out what's going on with the outsiders and all that. And it seems like Naomi and Shadow are kind of butting heads on what needs to happen, considering Oliver, Shadow, of course, saying, let's go take care of the outsiders, where Naomi is caring about his health. And then all of a sudden, Henry looks at the TV and just like, oh, hey, guys, downtown Seattle, live feed. Vertigo is literally attacking everyone. He's just in the middle of the street saying, hey, I'm Vertigo. Green Arrow did this. He's the reason you're all suffering. Take my weird mind powers. So Oliver says, we got to go take care of that. And Shadows tells him, you are useless out there, man. You can't shoot an arrow straight. I will go take care of that. You stay here. And Henry and Naomi both say, no, that's also no good. His powers are stretching out like half a mile in every direction. There's no way you're going to be able to get close enough. Unless we use the rocket arrow. And Shadow's like, dear Lord, what in the hell is a rocket arrow? So at that point, Oliver basically says, no, screw that. I'm the protector of Seattle. I'm going to go protect the city from Vertigo. And Shadow punches him in the face and knocks him out, saying, anyone got a problem with what I just did there? Cool? No? Give me the rocket arrow. So Naomi goes with to provide backup support. And we see Vertigo on live TV basically saying like, yep, this was Green Arrow's fault. I hope you understand that. He needs to stop me. And Vertigo's talking to his goons that are there saying, hey, once I got Green Arrow and kill him, I need to be in the jet like immediately. So be ready for wheels up. And one of his goons is like, sir, you have gone on live TV and shown yourself to be this murderer. I feel like you're kind of getting away from our cause and like making it a lot harder for us to move about unnoticed. And Vertigo basically says like, okay, well, you're one of my oldest henchmen. I fully understand. Pass the phone to someone else. And he says, okay, pass it over. Yeah, kill henchman number 1. So henchman 1 gets shot in the head. Second henchman picks up and Vertigo's like, yes, this is for our country. This is for Vlatava. So Oliver comes to and Henry's like, yeah, no, they're out there taking care of it. You should probably stand back because, again, you cannot fire a bow. So Shadow makes her way up to the roof, starts loading up a rocket arrow. Her and Naomi butt heads a little bit some more, saying like, yeah, no, it's you, Naomi, I can tell that you're in love with Oliver. I too fell for one of the Queen boys. Just know it's a very turbulent relationship ahead of you. So at that point, she's about to set up the rocket arrow when all of a sudden, Dick Dragon comes up and kicks Shadow in the back. And he starts attacking her. She starts throwing punches. And he's like, let Green Arrow know that if he wants in, I am now the one standing in his way. I now rule Seattle. And we see he has like, the best way I can describe it is, in like Fallout and those games where there's like the slowdown of time and you can see like the weak points on people's bodies. He has that vision. He's able to just pick that out and know exactly where to hit. And he uses it to take out Shadow pretty effectively. So when Shadow doesn't respond, Oliver picks up and he's like, all right, well, here's the thing. I think I can fight Vertigo because he already has shattered my eardrum. So how could it get any worse? So he starts making his way down and basically saying, yep, I got to get out there. And Henry can do nothing to stop him. So as Vertigo starts picking on this soldier that's down there, because I guess the National Guard or something got called out, he basically does the whole like, you stupid Americans. I watched your country become more and more corrupt from the outside, and now you're so worried about an outside thing, you're not even worrying about your inside corruption. So all it takes is one little push, and I will completely take your country apart. And then he blows up the soldier's brain. And then Green Arrow steps up, and he's just like, all right, Werner, it's you and me. Let's get this over with. And, they talk a bit, they share a thing, but then finally Green Arrow's like, enough talk, let's fight. And as Vertigo starts launching his power at Oliver, Oliver's like, I've already been exposed to this. I have already been hit by this power. So eventually I stop trying to fight it, and like it comes in waves, and I just start riding the waves. I start seeing it for what it is. It's a pattern. And I just start analyzing it. I figure out what the pattern is, and then I'm able to overcome it. And he lands a super solid punch right in Vertigo's face, knocking him out. One of the other soldiers comes up, grabs him, just like, Green Arrow, I got you. And he's like, not yet. And he walks over to Vertigo and rips the implant out of the back of his head. And Vertigo's like, oh, you think you've seen the last of me? I will retreat to Vlatava and I will plot my revenge. This will go on forever. And Green Arrow's like, dude, you're going to prison. You're not going back to Vlatava. Why would you think you're going back to Vlatava? You just went on TV and showed that you are a terrorist. You are going to jail. Goodbye. So at that point, Shadow comes to. Naomi's walking her out, and she's like, oh yeah, I got attacked by this man. He's like a dragon. And Oliver's like, wait a minute, 3 dragons. That was a thing in my prophecy. Okay, hold on. We need to see this man. But then we cut over for a little epilogue, and this is heavy, guys. We cut over to a clock shop called the Clock King, where Billy Talkman, the Clock King, works, and he's fixing a clock, listening to the news report saying how, oh yes, Seattle's going down, and these gang wars and all this stuff's going on. And then a voice comes up from behind Billy. Billy pulls out a gun, aims at him. The voice is basically saying, like, man, you and I have both seen war before. This isn't war. This is a slaughter. And we got to get out there. I've heard the name Dragon on the streets. That's why I'm here. Green Arrow seems too preoccupied, so we got to take care of this dragon guy ourselves. And Billy's like, oh, yeah? How do you know I'm not the dragon? And this shadowy figure says, because I know you've got a score to settle with the dragon as well. And then it reveals that this is Andy Diggle from the Arrow TV show. He steps up and he says, it's me. It's Diggle. I'm back. And we have to bring all of our past sins back into the light. So it seems like Diggle's responsible for Dick Dragon. And I know his name is Richard Dragon, but I'm going to keep calling him Dick Dragon. It's a choice. I mean, it's better than oh God, what was the girl's name? I'm completely blanking on it. Felicity. That was it. Better than Felicity. I'll give it that. Overall, it's a good issue. I mean, I've liked Green Arrow from the top. I felt like this one was a bit more scattershot, though. It didn't feel like there was really one specific focus, especially when you focus on the fact that last issue was Vertigo just being left in Vlatava. It's just weird that they brought him into Seattle specifically with the point of, we're just going to wrap it up now anyways. It felt like it could have just been wrapped up last issue, I guess is what I'm saying. It felt like this issue wasn't necessary, except that we wanted Vertigo to be locked up in America for some reason, which fine, I guess, but it just seemed like an unnecessary step. It seemed like a little detour, whereas we should have been more wholesale focusing on this Outsiders plot that we've been building to. So overall, I think this is probably still a solid 7.5. The art's fantastic. I'm never going to get tired of that, especially the way it shows off Vertigo's powers. It looks great. So yeah, it's a fine issue. It just felt like a detour that was kind of unnecessary in the grand scheme of things. But hey, we got Andy Diggle out of it, so hooray. StormWatch number 24, written by Jim Starlin, art by Yvel Guichet. Last issue was a bit of like a wrap-up to the last arc sort of thing, as well as introducing some new characters. This issue is nothing but exposition. So last time we had Engineer get some glowing red eyes and saying, hey, I've taken over Engineer, but I swear to God it's to save the Earth. This issue picks up with a little flashback, I believe, from Midnighter, basically saying, yeah, I was abducted by aliens. They did some experiments on me, and I kept on wondering, why me? Why me alone? I was never allowed to speak. Then one day I got out through a grating vent, which, mind you, he did so by unscrewing the flathead screwdriver screws from the vent, which seems very not alien to me, but regardless, he gets out, crawls through the vent, and then it gives way and he falls into another person's cell, which he didn't know there were other people, and turns out that it was Apollo when he was just a kid. So that's the thing. Regardless, we pick back up in modern day. Midnighter comes to because Engineer knocked him unconscious because he tried to attack her with a knife, which she says, that's stupid. Why would you do that? And then she said, all right, is everybody here? Is everyone in the room? My name is AI, just literally AI. I am an AI, and I am here to help protect your team and your planet. And she says, it's a long story, but I'm here to protect you from a guy named Extremax the Omega. I'm just going to call him Extremax from now on. And it's such a convoluted story here, but basically it starts off, though, with Storm Control saying, now, wait a minute, hold on. You've just taken over one of our agents. To make sure that you are good and cool and stuff, you got to let her come back into the forefront. So give up control. And she's like, fine, whatever. Time is of the essence. So Engineer comes back and just be like, hey, I was poking around inside of AI when AI had control. You better listen to it. It's super important. Extremax is no joke. Okay, bye. And then AI comes back in control. So we open up with Extremax. He started off as a slave. He was able to crawl into tiny little nooks and crannies. And one day he was able to work with some machinery. And turns out that he just has the gift, which means that he is able to tell how any machinery works just by interacting with it. So at that point, he started raising the ranks until in this slavers colony, he eventually made it all the way to CEO. And then he sold the company and bought himself a top tier Starfleet with a whole bunch of private mercenaries at his command, and he started making his way to different planets and star systems, absorbing their technology, bartering it for them, and if no deal could be met, he just killed the people on the planet for it. So eventually he kept going more and more, deeper and deeper. His thirst was unquenchable for how much technology and power he wanted, until eventually, it's like a century passed, his body started giving way, and he put his brain into a robot. And that all happened 50,000 years ago, and now he's constructed this massive ship called the Alcazar Astral, which is the most powerful battle cruiser ever. And in order to keep it going, regardless of what planets he comes across, whether they can make deals with him or not, he absorbs them and completely destroys them for their resources, I guess. And finally, at this point, the story pauses and Lobo's like, I'm sorry, you're saying that this guy is coming to our planet and he's going to wipe out all life on Earth? I'm out. I bail. Goodbye, everyone. And Apollo says, now hold on, Lobo. You're part of the team. And Lobo says, screw you. I have already beaten you once. I'll beat you again. And then there's just a single wham panel as Apollo knocks Lobo into the wall because he's like, oh, now I'm fully charged. You can't stand against me. So AI then continues saying, yeah, a lot of more advanced societies than you have tried to challenge him. None of you have succeeded, so there's no way to beat him. This all went on until about 3 centuries ago when the Collective were finally like, hey, wait a minute, hold on now. I don't like this guy, because the Collective are apparently very against high-tech stuff, to which Storm Control points out we didn't even realize that. They're against high-tech stuff. And it's like, yeah, no, anything that's too far against, that's their central tenet. That's what they're all about, is stopping high-tech stuff. And that's why they've also been hunting me, the AI. And then she goes off on this whole other thing, saying like, yes, I keep on like backing myself up in different places so that when the Collective does end up wiping me out, I always have a backup ready. So they've never been able to truly get rid of me. And it's like, okay, well, why hasn't the Collective been able to wipe away Extremax? And it turns out it's because he possesses limited time travel capabilities, enough to keep his ship like a half second out of focus with the rest of the universe. So they're not able to really lock onto him. And he's like, all right, anyway, none of that stuff matters. Ignore all that. Here's the thing that you need to worry about. Extremax, ignores Extremax. Many years ago, there was an ancient artifact made by some old mystics throughout the universe. And this artifact is like super duper powerful. So they broke it into 3 pieces and scattered them across the universe. Way back in prehistoric times, your planet was chosen to hold one of the artifacts, so it's somewhere on Earth. 25 years ago, Extremax got one of the artifacts. The Collective, a few years later, got the other part. So now, they each have one part. They're coming here to Earth for the last piece of it. I realize you have it. I rushed ahead, and I'm here to warn you about it, because we need to get it before either of them so we can make a deal with one of them. And he's like, okay, why would we want to get in the middle of them? And then all of a sudden alarm bells start going off, and AI is like, I think you'll understand why it's so important right now. By the way, apparently this StormWatch has never existed in the Bleed, which is, I thought, just a common thing with StormWatches. They were instead just like out in space. And so AI pulled them into the Bleed and like introduced them to it. So that's a thing. But at this point, pulls up the Earth and says, like, there's your Earth in real time. This is exactly what's going on. Here comes the ship. And the ship is hypermassive. Like, it's bigger than the moon. And everyone's like, whoa, hold on. How can it be that big? And it's not tearing apart the Earth or the moon with its gravitational ability. And he just says, like, it's just because Extremax is that super awesome. So AI goes on to explain a little bit further in detail here. Okay. Collective and Extremax are on opposite ends. No matter what, they are going to fight each other, and one of them is going to win. If we take the third piece, we can make a deal with Extremax and work with him against the collective. Because clearly you guys don't like either side. I personally don't like the collective. And we've shown that Jenny Soule is the first person in all of history to ever kill not just one, but 3 collective members. So that's the one we should be trying to wipe out the most. And then we can focus on Extremax afterwards. So right now, our goal is go down and try to make a deal with Extremax and see if we can work together to find the missing piece. So who's up for it? And that's where the issue ends. I have never seen an issue be so unapologetically just exposition. It's actually baffling to me how nothing happens in this entire issue besides here's the villain we're going to deal with. That being said, I kind of like the idea. It's not super deep. It's not intricately well thought out. I like we're bringing the collective back where I thought they kind of would. They were either going to be the constant villains or they were going to be like, you know, punted off to the side and we're not going to deal with them for another several arcs. The fact that they're kind of this through line does a good job of tying that in. But I cannot forgive the fact that this is entirely just, here's me giving you the history of this man so that way we don't have to worry about it drip fed to you over future issues. Like, that should not take the full comic to get that across. So overall, I think that this one is, I got to give this one just a straight 5. It would be lower if it wasn't for the fact that, like, I kind of like the concept. That gives it like an extra point, maybe. But yeah, I can't give it higher than a 5 just based off of nothing happens. It's just exposition. You could completely skip this and someone could just say like, yeah, there's a space warlord and he doesn't like the time travel guys. Done. That's all you needed. Jesus. The Movement number 5, written by Gail Simone, art by Freddie Williams II. So last issue was basically just a big fight scene with all the cops and stuff, and then they gave a bunch of origin stuff in between. This issue, a lot more cohesive in my opinion. So we open up with Mr. Cannon, the bad guy of the series, giving this talk to like a board of directors, and he's basically saying like, well, these socialists, these kids out there, we got to teach them a lesson, so we're going to add more firepower to the police. And all the directors are like, okay, see, Mr. Cannon, here's the thing. You're kind of bringing a lot of attention to us, and if everybody can record us and get our faces, because we like being a shadowy organization and all, maybe we should just leave the city. Maybe leave Coral City to its own devices. That sounds better to me. And then Cannon's like, good, but where would you go? And he pulls up this huge TV array of showing all these, like, the movement has spread across the entirety of America and even outside America as well. So nowhere is safe from this idea of police accountability. So we go to a donut shop, or a diner, I should say, where the main cop, I can't remember his name, but the main cop steps up and meets up with Virtue. And Virtue is out of costume, and she's just like, oh, it's Captain Mears, that's what it is. And Mears is like, oh, so you're not wearing your mask. And she's like, oh no, you might see the skin around my eyes. How tantalizing. Look, you still don't know who I am. It's no big deal. And Mears basically says, okay, you want to know what's up? Here's what's up. You have 2 of my cops, and I need them back. And she's like, okay, why? Why should I give them back to you? And she's like, well, I know that you're planning a trial of these cops, and it's all for the cameras. And Virtue's like, oh, so you do have a mole. Okay, well, thank you for that information. And he lays out like, look, I'm not here to argue. I'm here to save your people, because they're sending in like superhuman people now. It's not just cops you're dealing with. It's going to be people with actual powers. And I don't think you can handle that. And she's like, all right, well, you still have yet to offer me anything. And he's like, all right, 2 things. 1, a civilian review board for the claims of police malfeasance. It won't be an internal thing anymore. And 2, we go back to patrolling your area, but if a civilian wants, they can do a ride along at their own risk. That's on them. And she's just like, okay, those are two pretty good things, but like, why do it? This isn't popular for you. Why are you going to do it? And she's just like, because I agree. The cops should be doing good, and we have failed at that quite a bit. But I need you to understand here, the biggest thing is that they are bringing in superhumans to try to quash you. You need to back down. And she uses her virtue power to read the cop, and she's just like, I believe you. I think you're telling the truth, but regardless, we're not going to back down. We're still going to hold this trial for the cops. And she's like, no, you don't understand. You need to stop it. And she's like, even if I wanted to, I can't. It's already begun. And we cut over to the trial, and we show that the prosecution is catharsis, whereas the defense is tremor. And they basically say the only thing you're on trial here for is the sexual harassment of a minor. How you went after that blonde girl in issue 1. How do you plead? And the one big cop is just basically like dead silence, not playing along at all. But the younger one says guilty. Look, they have us on tape. We did it. I want to go home to my family. Let's get out of here. And he apologizes for his actions and whatnot. But the other cop, Wit, he just stays silent the whole time. And the girl's in the audience, and she's just like, oh, you're sorry? That big guy had me fearing for my life, and you're sorry? So we cut back real quick to Mears, who hops into the car with Officer Yi, who, if you remember, is the one who was sleeping with his wife, and basically tells Officer Yi, like, look, she paid for the bill in mostly singles. She's clearly not a stripper. She's working with tips, but it's not like a high tipping place. It's not high bills. So my guess is she's working at like some low-down chain restaurant in the area as a waitress. Start sending out all the scouts in that area. We're going to track her down, and we're going to figure out what's going on. So we see Tremor providing the defense, saying like, Officer Witt, have you gotten any commendations? And he's like, yeah, 4 times. And he's like, oh, what was the last one for? And he's like, I saved a child from a burning building. And he's like, that's very heroic of you. And Catharsis stands up and is like, that has nothing. They can save a baby and be sexual harassers. Just because they were good in the one instance doesn't mean they're good overall. And Witt starts freaking out, but then Lou is just like, no, we messed up. We admit that. We're just humans. We make mistakes. But like, it gets to us when we are trying to do our best, but nobody out there trusts us. Nobody trusts the police. And how are we supposed to be able to work like that? But seriously, and he looks at the girl like, I am sorry. I am truly, absolutely sorry. And Witt's basically like, enough. This is a stupid kangaroo court. I don't recognize its legitimacy. You do what you're going to do, but you're fooling yourself and it's going to change anything. And Vengeance Moth, who's running the whole thing, is like, well, maybe, but regardless, we're going to send this to the jury. So at that point, we cut over to Mouse, who's writing letters to Tremor saying how much he loves her and wants her to be his girlfriend. And that's just a thing. And then up above the sewers where he sleeps, we see the cornea killer has cornered a woman and is about to cut out her eyes when all of a sudden a mouse sees it and goes down and talks to Mouse himself, being like, oh, are you sure it's the cornea killer? Well, we have to get up there. So we cut over to Vengeance Moth, who's leading the prisoners, the cops, back to their cells. No jury's been returned yet, but she's just like, oh, well, I don't know if you did it or not. That's not for me to judge. That's up to a jury. And at that point, Witt's like, dude, this is just a chick in a wheelchair. We can take her out. Let's get out of here. They're going to kill us. They are going to murder us on camera. They're terrorists. We got to go. And so he flips over Vengeance Moth's wheelchair and dumps her on the ground. And we see 2 things simultaneously. The first is that Vengeance Moth has some sort of powers where she floats up into the air saying like, oh, you shouldn't have done that. Now I know you're one of the bad ones. And she starts going to attack the cops. And Catharsis sees this and was like, oh, you dumped her out of her wheelchair, huh? Well, have at ye. And then we get up to the cornea killer thing. He's about to kill this young woman when Mouse comes out of the sewer and starts attacking him. He managed to get off a few good hits, but Cornea Killer just straight up throws him into a wall and says, like, you're not allowed to touch me. You're undesirable. And Mouse manages to get a scratch off on his face and says like, well, Virtue says you don't get to do this anymore. So go, get out of here. And he says, well, I'll get to it in a second. I do want to get back to the cops thing. As Catharsis is about to attack the officers, she is stopped in her tracks by Tremor, who turns out to be the mole. She opens up a hole in the wall for the cops and says, go, get out of here, take the tunnel and run. Catharsis is like, you're a traitor. You betrayed the movement. And she's like, if this is what the movement's about, I don't want to be in the movement anymore. I quit. So the last thing we get is a cornea killer. As he's scratched by Mouse, says, oh, you don't understand. I bought and paid for this city. I own this. And as such, we've hired some new groundkeepers. Behold, the Graveyard Faction. And it's a group of seemingly like 4 supervillains with superpowers that are here to take out the movement. And sure, I like it. I do want to make that clear. That long, exasperated sigh is not because I didn't like it. It's just, each of these issues, it feels like they're stretching themselves too thin. This is the first one where there's only really been like 2 plots running at any given time. We had Virtue talking to the cop, and then we had this trial thing going on, and then when the Virtue was done, we went over to Mouse. That's fine. I'm fine with that. It felt very contained, very centralized and focused. It felt like a good read. My problem is that I skipped over a bunch of points in there where, like, there's a point where Burden, just while he's seeing Catharsis beat up the cops, is like, my mother said I should always fight for the side of good, but I don't know what that is anymore. And I'm like, I don't care. It's not that I don't think Burden could be an interesting character to, like, dive into. It's that he's not a part of this scene, and cutting away to his internal monologue is actively distracting. So, mild issues with that, but it happens frequently enough that it is a problem. So overall, I'm going to give this one a 6. It's fine. It's okay. It's not great by any standards, but it is positive movement. I feel like it's finally saying what it wants to say since issue 1, which is like, yeah, no, police have issues. They need to be confronted. They need to be talked about, but this book is taking the stance of not every cop is a bad cop. It is definitely some rotten ones, but there are some that are trying to do the right thing. That's debatable on whatever side you come down on, but I like the way this book is handling the idea at the very least. So I'm going to give this one a 6. I think that's its shining merit. I just wish it was told in a little bit cleaner of a fashion. Swamp Thing number 24, written by Charles Soule, art by Andrei Bressan. So last issue was kind of just the end of a little side story with Constantine and Cedar and some other stuff, but it ended off with Cedar showing up, punching out Capuchin, and leaving a message for Swamp Thing. This issue picks up slightly earlier, where Cedar has arrived back in the desert where he made an oasis before, and this guy's waiting for him being like, hey, Swamp Thing showed up and totally trashed your oasis. Can we have another one, please? And Cedar's like, did he say why? And he's like, no, he just said it shouldn't exist. That's all he gave. And yeah, so could we have another one? And then Cedar's like, well, if Swamp Thing says it shouldn't exist, who am I to argue? I gotta go now. And so he makes a portal and travels to beat up Capuchin and do all that stuff. So cutting to now, Swamp Thing arrives and says like, hey, Capuchin, sorry, what happened here? And it's like, oh, don't worry about it. And like, I'm also a fast healer. That's part of my thing. So my arm will be fixed soon enough. And Swamp Thing gives her like a makeshift sling out of twigs and vines and stuff. And she apologizes for not being able to defend herself. She's like, oh, I am here to fight for you. And I failed. I let this man go. And she's like, okay, well, that's not your job. And she's like, that's my only job. So he looks at the message, which says, it's time, Professor. And she asks what it means. And he's like, oh, I was a researcher before I was the Avatar. And she's like, aren't you still a scientist? And like, that wasn't taken away from you. And he's like, touche, fair enough. But very few people know that Alec Holland, the researcher, became Swamp Thing. So I don't know who this is. Regardless, he'll be back. And me and him are going to have a long overdue conversation. As for you, Capuchin, I'm finally going to like deal with you. I'm finally going to give you something to do. So they go over to what was Abigail Arcane's house and says, yeah, you can stay here. You've already gotten hurt. I'm not going to let that happen again. And she's like, oh, whose house is this? And it's like, a friend. And she's not coming back. And he's like, oh, okay, this is your ex-lover's house? That's awkward. I'd rather not. And she basically says, like, look, I don't really want you to be here, but it's better than being in the swamp. By the way, I don't even know anything about you. Like, what's your deal? And Cappuccino's like, well, you've been running off every time I've tried to explain it to you, but okay, here it goes. I was born in 1100 in France, and that's 1100 using the current calendar. And then as she's trying to explain, Swamp Thing is like, wait a minute, hold on, Cedar's here, I gotta go. And she's like, seriously? Oh my god. So over at the Parliament of Trees, where, reminder, they're like saplings at this point, they're very small trees, we see the Cedar is there, and he's just like, you're the Parliament, you represent the green, I'm not, why did you give me these powers if you didn't want me using them? And they basically said, like, well, you demanded them because you saved Alec's life. Like, we gave you the powers, but we have made our choice. Alec is the champion, not you. And then Cedar is about to do something, but then Swamp Thing just sprouts up out of nowhere and says, Cedar, you wanted to talk, let's talk. And he just starts attacking Cedar. And Cedar's like, dude, stop. I genuinely just want to talk. I didn't want to fight or anything like that. And he's like, nope, too late for that. And he keeps on in his head saying, like, oh, I should snap his arm for what he did to Capucine. And there's that little voice in his head that's like, do it. Kill him. Do it. So at one point, finally, he grabs Cedar, throws him down the ground, and Cedar's hood comes off. And he's like, wait a minute. I know you. You're Jason Woodrue. And honest to God, I completely forgot that Alec Holland even knew Jason Woodrue, but they do establish that Jason is the one who saved Alec's life and threw him into the swamp, thus allowing him to become Swamp Thing. And Swamp Thing's like, I think that memory was taken away from me back in last year's annual. So sorry. No, I don't entirely remember that, but okay, is that true, Parliament? And Parliament's like, yeah, no, he threw you in the swamp. He's the whole reason. That's why we gave him certain gifts. He's able to do things with the green. Not quite swamp things, but things. And Jason's like, yeah, no, my thing is I have seeds, any type of seeds, and I can use them and they do things, whatever I will them to do. And together we can do so much more, Swamp Thing. And Jason's like, okay, hear me out. Why not make the whole world green? Like, what's stopping us from, like, we can feed the world, we can fuel it, we can end disease and such. We can do all that if we just make infinite green. So why aren't we doing that? And he's like, oh, Jesus Christ. Okay. There's a balance, man. Look, remember you made like some rice patties in a field in like Bangladesh? And he's like, yeah, I fed a whole village with that. And it's like, right. But because you did that, a bunch of coral reef stuff or a kelp forest just disappeared off the coast of this country. And the entire ecosystem there died because it was just gone. There's a limited, you can't just make new green. It has to come from somewhere else. And Jason's like, oh, I didn't know that. Okay, sorry. And Swamp Thing's like, you didn't know that because you aren't as connected with the green. You're not as interwoven as I am. And Jason's like, I could be. I just need to like practice more. I want to be part of this, please. I really like the green. And Swamp Thing's like, no. Look, people have died because of your actions here. People are dead. I can't let you keep going. And so he turns to the Parliament and says, you made a mistake. Take away his powers. And Jason screams out, no. He's like, I just did what you asked, and I made a mistake. It's not worth me losing what I've looked for here. And Swamp Thing's like, what are you waiting for? But it's go ahead. But the Parliament doesn't do anything. And Jason's like, you want me to prove I'm worthy? Fine, I'll show you. And he throws out a seed. It lands on Swamp Thing. And Swamp Thing's like, seriously, dude, I'm the avatar of the green. I'm not going to let this thing sprout. Like, I clearly have control over this. And Jason's like, oh, is that so? And then all of a sudden, it erupts into this giant, like, Venus flytrap looking thing that starts latching onto Alec. And Swamp Thing then immediately starts charging. He makes, like, a wooden spear on his arm. And Jason is able to crack right through it via his staff that he holds. And the plant starts attacking Alec's head. It starts stabbing him through his eye. And he's like, jeez, why is the Parliament not stopping this? What is happening? And so Jason stands before the Parliament and he's like, you see, I'm worthy. I'm totally good for this. And all of a sudden, Capucine comes out of nowhere and kicks Jason in the face. And he falls down to the ground. And we see Alec he manages to get some wood around Jason Woodrue, and the little voice instead is saying, like, kill him now, he's too dangerous to be left alive. And he says, like, yep, I gotta do it, I gotta kill him. But he stops himself, and Jason basically starts like, I totally beat Swamp Thing, it's only because this chick showed up, whoever she is. And he says, like, we've beaten him, I'm not gonna let him go, but, like, we have to deal with this. And we see Jason is let go of the wood stuff. He throws another seed at Capucine, but it doesn't sprout. And his green powers have been revoked. And Swamp Thing's like, finally, Jesus, man, Parliament, what are you doing? And at that point, the Parliament chimes in and says, like, hey, yeah, no, we got rid of his powers so you didn't kill him, but we're going to give him back. And Swamp Thing's like, excuse me? You're going to do what now? And he's like, look, he just smoked your ass in a one-on-one fight. Like, he's really good at what he does here. Here's what we're going to do, okay? We're going to give you time to train and become the best version of the Avatar of the Green as you can be, same to Jason, and then you two are going to fight again at a time of our choosing, and if he wins, he becomes the new Avatar of the Green. That is the will of the Parliament. And Swamp Thing just stands there for a second and then screams like, what? And that's it. That's the issue. He just screams, what? I think I saw Cedar being Jason Woodrue beforehand. I don't know if, like, I caught a spoiler or if I just figured it was, but yeah, that makes sense. I like the Jason... Like, it seemed even from the beginning that he was doing this stuff altruistically. Like, he was trying to do good in general. And then, like, this guy came up and said, like, yeah, no, the Avatar said that the Oasis shouldn't exist. And Jason's just like, oh, okay, well, let me go check with the bosses. Like, he's not evil in his own right, at least not yet. He wants to be the Avatar of the Green, and that's making him an enemy of Swamp Thing. But, like, inherently, he's not doing anything wrong. It's just that he doesn't understand the system as a whole. So I like him as a villain in that regard. I like him as someone who I can fully see the side of, and it makes sense. And the Parliament is such just a bag of dicks here of, oh, yeah, we're just going to make you fight for it. Tee-hee. So overall, I think this is... I'm going to give this one a solid 8. I really do enjoy it. I think it's a great issue of Swamp Thing. I think that it ends on a little bit of a weird note of Swamp Thing just saying what. I think it could have been a bit more stronger of an ending, but it's a funny looking panel. I'll give it that. So 8 for this. Phantom Stranger number 12, written by J.M. DeMatteis, art by Fernando Blanco. So this is technically a tie-in to Forever Evil, but, like, it's not. It's just got the banner on it. It's not even. So last issue was a Trinity War tie-in, and in that, Phantom Stranger straight up got zooped out of existence. He was erased to the point where nobody would even remember he ever existed. So kind of hard to come back from that, but we open up with just, like, a 9-panel grid of pure white, and then all of a sudden caption boxes start saying, like, oh God, consciousness, a sense of self, it's coming back. And then all of a sudden a black dot appears and starts zooming in until finally we see it's Phantom Stranger. And he's like, okay, all of a sudden I remember being erased and now I'm coming back to life, and what in the hell is this? And all of a sudden he just shows up back in his own house, aka Philip Stark's house, and God as a dog is just sitting in front of him, and he's like, hey, welcome back. And Phantom Stranger looks around and he's like, this is impossible. I was erased from existence. And he's like, yeah, impossible. You do understand I'm God, right? That's kind of in my purview of things to do. Look, Stranger, maybe I'm just not understanding this properly. I do believe I told you last time when you tried to steal the soul, or not steal, but take the souls of your loved ones out of heaven. I said, if you ever come back and try to do that again, you'd be wiped from existence. Did I say that? And Phantom Stranger's like, yeah. He's like, cool. So why did you immediately go and try to do that for Dr. Light? For the sake of Batman, even. Like, you don't even like Batman. What in the hell? And he's like, I did it because it had to be done. And God's like, nah, it doesn't make, like, here's the thing. I could take a million billion years to puzzle over why it is you did what you did. Frankly, I don't think there's a good answer here, except that you have been changed by your family. You are no longer the ultimate sinner. You are now something else. So God takes 2 of the silver coins off of his necklace and says, like, there, you've done well. However, you are still on the path. You are not totally absolved yet. You need to continue forward. Just know that this is all going to depend on you reclaiming 2 souls. And that's my hint. And then God disappears. And Phantom Stranger, like, looks around the yard for a while, and he's a little bit satisfied, like, hey, I did it. So at that point, we see coming out of the darkness of the yard is Sin Eater, aka the real Philip Stark. And he's talking to this demon dog who I'm unfamiliar with, but they seem to be working together, and they're saying, like, maybe we need to turn up the heat on Phantom Stranger. So then we cut over across town, and turns out the teenager that Phantom Stranger saved the soul of because he was unjustly murdered in his home. This teenager is just hanging out with his family, but his family is like just subconsciously aware that something is wrong with him, that he's not supposed to be here. They don't even remember that he was murdered, but like they can just feel something's wrong. And he tries to connect with them. He's like, hey, Mom, don't be upset. Everything's going to be fine. And she just freaks out. She's like, get out of here. Don't touch me. And then she realizes what she said. And she's like, oh, I'm sorry. I don't know why I did that. And he's like, no, I get it. So he goes back into his room, and he's just, he's pissed off. He's like, I never met that Phantom Stranger or Stark or whoever the hell he is. And then all of a sudden he gets this energy zap from his fingers that just fries his laptop. And he's able to then get up and walk through the wall of his bedroom. So back in Stranger's house, he's going through his wife's closet. He finds one of her dresses, and he smells it, and he's like, oh, that's good. But then he gets upset, throws it across the room in anger. And all of a sudden, I think his name is Chris. I'm not sure if they give it. Hold on, they do give it. Let me just make sure. Yes, it is Chris. So Chris enters the room, and he's like, hey, looks like you're having a hard time too. And he's like, yeah, totally. Get out. And Chris says, no, hold on. You're the only one who might understand me here. And Phantom Stranger just tells him, I gave you a second chance at life, man. No one else gets that. You should be taking, go out there and make the most of it. And then Phantom Stranger like catches a glimpse, and he's like, oh, wait, yeah, something's different with you. And he's like, right? And Stranger tries to brush it off, saying like, well, different doesn't mean bad inherently. Anyway, I got to go take care of something. He just like disappears and reappears in Dr. 13's office. And Chris manages to tag along, and Phantom Stranger's like, how the hell do you do that? And he's like, I don't know. I got powers now. I'm still trying to figure him out. So he tells Chris, like, look, if you're going to stick around and I can't get rid of you, just shut up. I don't want to hear you. So they make their way through 13's office. It's complete wreck. Everything's thrown apart. And they start seeing water mixed with blood coming from the bathroom. And it's like, yeah, it appears that he is feeling a bit guilty as we see him, wrist slit in the bathtub, seemingly dead. And Stranger comes up being like, I still got a spark of life in him, but he's only got seconds. So Chris then runs forward and says, no, I won't let that happen. He grabs the wrists of Dr. 13 and manages to bring him back to life with his new special powers. And Stranger's like, okay, I guess that's a thing now. And 13 is super upset. He's like, oh God, I feel so guilty. I shouldn't have done it. It's all my fault. And Chris basically says, like, Stranger, he wasn't at fault. He feels like remorse. He was just being used by the question. And he doesn't say the question, but he was. So then Phantom Stranger reaches inside of 13's head, pulls out what seems to be a question mark made of shadow, and squishes it. And he's like, all right, well, that's out. So 13 starts feeling better, and he asks him how Stranger is even still alive after being impaled by the Spear of Destiny. And he's like, look, regardless of that, can you ever forgive me? And Stranger says like, I've done some bad things myself, and I kind of get how important forgiveness is. So yes, I forgive you. And 13's like, great, awesome. Let's go to my house. And they're like, wait, this isn't your house? And he's like, nah, this place sucks. And apparently he owns like a penthouse overlooking Central Park in New York. And he's like, yeah, my family comes from like super rich money. It's the 13 like thing. Once my parents died, I inherited all of it. Sure, my sister got a couple properties, but I kept this one because it's super awesome. And at this point, this is the only thing that ties it into Forever Evil, is that Chris notices that there's an eclipse going on and was like, guys, isn't this weird? And they're like, yeah, we deal with weird stuff all the time. This is pretty normal, all things considered. So that's that, I guess. So at this point, Chris is like, hey, Dr. 13, yeah, I saved your life. And my parents are kind of not cool with me right now. Can I stay with you in the penthouse? And he's like, yeah, there's like 7 bedrooms. Just pick 1 or 2 of them. I don't care. Like, hey, stranger, you want to stay here too? And stranger's already disappeared. And he's like, yeah, you'll be back. I got a feeling we're a team now. We're a couple of compadres. So stranger disappears and reappears back at his home. And he's like, well, that was Chris and 13. That's 2 souls. Is that what I was supposed to do? Is that me reclaiming the 2 souls and putting them towards something? I don't know. Could be. I hope so. And then as he approaches home, he looks and sees it is on fire. And sitting on top of the roof is Sin Eater. And he's like, hey, Phantom Stranger, look what I did. And so Stranger teleports inside his house, inside the flames. And he's like, what have you done? As the flames slowly consume him. So that was an issue. I enjoyed it. I think it was solidly written. I do think that it's kind of weird, though, that we went through this whole thing of like, you will be erased from all of time if you go to save 2 lives, or if you go and save a life from heaven. And then God just undoes it because he's like, why'd you do it? I told you not to do it, and you did it. It feels, I mean, I get it in the sense of like, it feels like it was a test sort of thing of like, would you be willing to sacrifice yourself for the greater good or something like that? I can get it, but they never really say that. They never really go that mile. God literally spends the pages just going like, man, I still don't get it. What in the hell is wrong with you? It wasn't saying so much of like, I told you that would happen, and you still did it, thus proving you are truly good at heart. So, I mean, I'm down for it. It's a solid issue overall. It feels more of we're putting pieces back where they should be, like 13 is back in Stranger's good graces. We got the dead teenager doing stuff now. It's a bunch of interesting stuff. I am not convinced of Sin Eater being a compelling villain yet, but he's screwing with Stranger, so there's got to be something to it. Overall, I think this one is pretty much definition of a 7. It's good. It's above average. It's still just missing that extra kick that pushes it into like great territory. As always, I'm a sucker for when this thing gets philosophical, and this is not really that at all. If anything, it's pretty straightforward. So 7 is where I feel like for this. And that's it. That's all the comics that came out from DC Comics this October 2nd, 2013. And I said at the beginning of the episode, there's just a few things I wanted to bring up here at the end. First and foremost, I will say this again in 1 month's time, but some of the issue 25s that are coming out are tie-ins to Batman Zero Year. So the things that you'd expect there to be of like, hey, how did this person meet Batman for the first time? Things like Catwoman, Batwing, stuff like that. Those will have tie-ins. That's obvious. However, it also stretches to the non-obvious ones like Flash and Green Lantern Corps. So if there's ever a book where I just say at the end of it like, and we'll pick this up in issue 26, or, and next time Batman, just know that's what I'm talking about, because it's not something I want to repeat over and over and over again of, and next time we're dealing with Batman Zero Year, which you can read about, blah, 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 blah. Not worth my time. So just know that's happening. Second, and this actually falls into the books that are coming out next week. We got 2 new number 1s next week. Now, one of them I've already been teasing, as has the entire line, and that is we're getting a bunch of Forever Evil spin-off books. Those include Rogue's Rebellion, Argus, and the one that's coming out next week, Forever Evil Arkham War, which I believe is just the inmates of Arkham are taking over Gotham, but they have to fight against the inmates of Blackgate Prison. It's a choice. I'm sure it'll be fine to some extent. It's definitely tie-in territory, though, so that's a thing. But second, and possibly more interesting, is the book Superman/Wonder Woman, where I think it's just 22 pages of them making out. I don't think anything else happens in that book, which is bold of them, but I can't see how sales are going to pick up, so we will check out that next week. However, there's also a couple other books, so why don't I just tell you what those are as well. Next week, we as well have Batman, Batgirl, Nightwing, Superboy, Green Lantern Corps, Katana, World's Finest, Suicide Squad, and Constantine. Out of those, golly, I believe Green Lantern Corps is part 2 of the Lights Out event. Superboy is technically a tie-in to Psywar, but it's not, but kind of is. And Suicide Squad, I believe, is a direct tie-in to Forever Evil. So pretty much the exact same that we had this week, just different titles doing the dirty work. So yeah, check those out if you're interested. As for other things, if you have any comments on the comics that I did this week, last week, and we could all go ahead and hit us up somewhere on the internet. We've got a Reddit, we've got a Discord, we have a Patreon, if that's the sort of thing that interests you. All the links to those are in the description. But yeah, that's pretty much it for me. It's good to be back in the flow of things, no longer in Villains Month, able to talk about comics like Batwing fighting against a British assassin. Yeah, that's what I was missing. Anyway, that'll do it for me. Thank you very much for watching, listening, however it is you consume this podcast. Be sure to tune in next week. And as always, try to remember, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.